Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Boom Time. And I can't tell you how excited. I'm excited every time we do a Boom Time and live, but tonight I'm particularly excited because we have a fantastic guest, and she might get a bit embarrassed when I say she is an inspiration to me. And I've written about it that she's an inspiration to me, and I'm so thrilled that she can join us this evening. So welcome, Karen Blackett, to Boom Time. I'm going to give you, we have a customary intro, Karen. I have to read it. And this is again a moment you might get embarrassed, but relish the love from the audience and from this. So Karen is a proven, experienced business leader with a record of accomplishment in creating vibrant cultures, energizing teams, and consistently delivering business growth and success. She's known for her transformative work with large, multidisciplined and diverse teams, delivering consistent commercial success. She's extensive experience at a national and regional level, of course, running offices all over the country: London, Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, Edinburgh, Ireland, and across EMEA. And she brings a different ingredient, definitely, I'd say, that creates the winning difference in business. As of January 2018, Karen took on a newly created role as the first UK country manager for WPP, the world's largest communications network, overseeing 11,000 people. Can you believe 11,000? That's crazy. Across a number of well-known brands such as Ogilvy's, Grey, VML, Y&R, Wunderman Thompson. And she was also appointed the CEO of Group M, additionally, as if there wasn't enough to do, Karen, in April 2020. In this role, she's responsible for delivering growth in WPP's second largest market with a revenue of over $2 billion. And what I love about this is Karen is also a regular in the top 10 of the UK's most influential Black business people in the Power List. And tonight we're going to be talking about the future of the business that she has created all this incredible impact within: media. So welcome, Karen. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. It is brilliant to be here. I think I want to finish now. I want to leave on that introduction. Don't want it to go downhill.
We were talking back before we joined. We were talking about what a wonderful day it was, and we were very. I know that you'd said that the dog had rolled in certain other animals' doo-doo and was running around a bit. So that just, aside from everything today, at least that's happened today as well.
Keeping it real, feet on the ground. Feet on the ground.
If nothing else roots you in life, it's something like that. But Karen, thanks for joining us. I know it's people always, every time I said I was interviewing you for the show today, people are always really excited. But I'd like to start obviously with you, and I'd like to ask, coming through what has arguably been the most kind of last 18 months been pretty torrid for everybody, for business and for individuals and everything else. I'd like to ask kind of how you're feeling first and foremost, and what did you learn most about yourself through lockdown?
Do you know what? The last 18 months have been such a learning curve for everyone, myself included. And I love those moments in any of your career where you really find yourself learning. And I was learning anyway because I was appointed in lockdown. Literally, I was announced on the 6th of March. We went into lockdown on the 23rd of March. And I started my additional role at Group M literally as I was announced, because the world had gone mad.
There's your induction.
And so I learned so much about how to connect in a virtual world, because I had to get to know the team. I didn't have the benefit of knowing the new team, as well as making sure that I was still in touch with my WPP team and our WPP CEOs, because we were all navigating our way through the fog with our clients, trying to work out what to do. So I really did learn how, I could also go into IT, I reckon, with how much I've had to learn about sorting out my laptop and printers and changing platforms from one to the next to communicate. Genuinely, I think I could have a second career in IT. But learning how to connect, I do think, and it sounds weird, but I genuinely think I got to know my new Group M senior leadership team quicker than I would have done in a physical world.
Right.
Because I was getting a window into their lives, because we were all working from home. So I met the children, I met the partners, I met the pets, which you would not, it takes time to do that with a new team. So I do think I got to know them quicker and better than I would have done in a physical world. And look, I really got to learn how to check in with people and read what wasn't being said,
Right.
which is, I think, important in my job. There's a brief, but it's what's behind the brief. And I really got to do that in the last 18 months. I learned about the importance of agility, but I also learned the importance of being kind to myself as well. And let's not try and emulate perfect, because we're not in the office. It's not going to be perfect conditions. There's no point trying to pretend it will be. The doorbell's going to go, the dog's going to bark, the kid's going to walk in. That's okay.
Yeah.
And look, there were all sorts of reports coming out at the beginning of lockdown about productivity is going to drop by 35%. And I don't know about you, Scott, I've worked harder than I ever have in my life. So I get, but I've had to learn to be kind to myself as well, because that ability to burn out and be fatigued, and I'm seeing a lot of fatigue because people have kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going, just trying to be kind to myself as well. And it was hard. It was hard, because you know, you've got your day job and then you've got everything else going on at home as well.
Exactly. And the two worlds, you know, the interesting is when you're in the office, you are quite separate from your home life and everything else, like you say, and that does engender a sort of behaviour, because you keep your office self here, and then you keep
creep. There's scope creep. There totally is scope creep. And I've always talked about work-life blend.
Yes.
Because work is life and life is work, and you have to know how to blend the two. And it's not about balance, because that means that there's a winner and a loser. So it's always about a blend. But there was definitely scope creep in terms of our personal lives and work lives, because you didn't have the commute anymore to either switch off or switch on. You know, lunch breaks became very sad desk lunches in your home with whatever you could find in the fridge. And, you know, the normal, I used to go out and just get some fresh air and walk in order to make sure that I could clear my head, get some inspiration and think. So I'd be walking around Sea Container's house, or walking around, you know, MediaCom, which is where I was based before the Group M role, just to get some thinking space. And that went out the window. So the discipline of how we work, I think we need to get back to. The good thing about the last 18 months is that I think we've proved to some people that may have been slightly cynical and negative in senior roles that working from home doesn't mean you're not working.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting what you say there as well, because there's a lot, the future of work and the future of media in particular, you know, when you say to me about being kind to yourself, not burning out, scope creep, finding time to be inspired outside of just what's happening right in front of you all the time, all of those things are A, very real, but B, they're inherent. You know, when I think a lot about media and advertising, which I used to work in too, all of those things are real, whether there's a lockdown or not. But actually what you're saying and what I agree with is, it's made us rethink those things. Like, you know, I'm not prepared to burn out anymore. I'm not prepared to work like that anymore. I'm not prepared to do all these things. That's going to have an interesting impact on the future of media and how people operate and work, based on, again, just what your insights were there.
But I think working in media, the advertising industry, the wider creative industry, it is such a privilege, because we get to do amazing things working with brilliant brands or with brilliant newcomers to the market. You're normally around some pretty amazing, creative, transformative people. And that's a privilege to be able to work in that sector compared to some other roles and brands and industries. It's a privilege. But that old adage of our sector being about working hard and playing hard, the last, 18 months, we've reevaluated as a society, not just our industry. As a society, we've reevaluated what's important. So thinking about the next generation, being kinder to ourselves and having more empathy with each other, expecting brands and organizations to play a role in making things better in society. I think we've become so much more empathetic and aware. And that doesn't mean we want to work any less. We just want to work in a different way.
Yeah, and work more smartly.
Exactly. And look, the George Floyd incident that happened last year, that was such, I do think that would, look, it's not the first time that we've seen a black man killed on our screen on TV. It's not.
Yeah.
You know, you'll remember Rodney King and the LA riots.
Yeah.
And that was captured on video.
Yeah.
But it was different this time because we've moved on as a society. We were all trapped in our homes and that you couldn't not see it.
Yeah.
We were all appalled. And I think that's been a catalyst for organisations and individuals to think about the part that they'll play. I do think we've become a lot more empathetic as a society, and what used to be important, you know, socialising, going out, it's further down on the list.
Yeah. And I often think there are two sorts of people. There are those who always see the impossible in, you know, when something like this happens, they think, oh, what can't we know? We can't do this. It's all impossible. But then there are people who focus on the art of the possible. It's exactly what you were saying there. The privilege which we have of working with great people and great brands, and indeed the opportunities that come. And I think you're always, for me, sort of a possible person, you know, and certainly in my experience, you've always thought
it's radiators and drains, I think, is my expression.
Yeah, exactly.
The radiator energy, stay clear of the people that drain it from you.
Absolutely, mood hoovers. But when you think about, you know, take everything into account, obviously, you know, what's been happening societally, but also what's been happening in your industry, what's been happening for you. What are the possibilities that you see going forward that make it even more exciting and make the opportunities even more exciting for the industry?
Look, our industry now is a wash with data. I mean, we know there's so much data, it's prolific, it's literally ubiquitous. And I think that brings interest and excitement if you know how to use it in the right way. And one of my mantras is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah. So, you know, I really do have a lens, as does Group M and WPP, about respecting data privacy, about ensuring that we use data in a responsible way. But that data for me is about insight. It's about audience. It's not about doing something which shows how funky, unique and clever you are. It's about insight, and it is about audience. And I'm excited by what the possibilities are. I'm from that and doing it properly. I'm going to sound really geeky, but I'm really excited by, you know, us moving into a cookieless world. I am. Because we're going to have to go back to understanding people. We're going to have to go back to working with our clients and how we use their first party data. We're going to have to go back to context being important in terms of where advertising is seen and how it's seen. We're going to need to ensure that our creative has context. I mean, that's brilliant. I think that brings so many possibilities where I think technology is brilliant and that technological advancement is brilliant, but it has made us lazy as an industry in terms of just leaving it for technology. I think where we can partner with technology, so I'm excited by how we can use AI in our creative work and in the mission for more diversity and inclusion. It's not an either or, and you know, to your point, the drains that are saying, well, AI is a nightmare, it's going to mean a lack of diversity. No, it means that we're actually going to be able to use AI to look at a bank and suite. There's a tool which the WPP technology team have created, which allows you to look at all of your creative assets from around the world by campaign, look at how representative it is in one press of a button to see where you're underserving. How brilliant is that? Amazing. I think it's amazing in terms of those technology advancements and how we can use it, and data leading to audience insights, which then we can merge into our brand stories. So I'm really excited by that. And look, the demise of the cookie means that we go back to context being king.
Excellent. I mean, I'm totally with you on that. I actually have another business that we co-created with my business partner Sam, and we use AI. But our big thing, of course, is we always say like creativity is the human superpower. And when you mix creativity with AI does all the kind of hard, boring stuff that you don't want to do. It allows you to be far more creative as an individual and solve the things, and let AI do all the kind of data crunching and everything else in the back. And I think it's that melding of those two things used correctly is definitely a massive, massive opportunity. But something you said, which I've always admired about your view on the world, Karen, as well, is it's helpful sometimes to kind of revisit the past as a way of thinking about the future. And I've worked with you and seen you in action firsthand, and your ability to shape like organizations and the way that they're thinking about and changing the future. And I'm specifically talking, when you were talking about empathy and context and everything then, of course, I can see your passion light up, but that was always my experience of working with you in the past, this human element and this people element and this kind of thinking about how you get the best out of people and empower people to do that. What's the kind of key to unlocking that in an organization, and how much impact do you think that's going to have on the industry going forward?
Something that I talk about a lot is there's a brilliant study by Deloitte University in the US, and it was a study which they did amongst a range of different business sectors. I think it was about 2013. They did a range of different business sectors, different industries, loads of different people, different seniorities, and they coined the term covering, which is the way in which people suppress something naturally about themselves in order to fit in with the mainstream culture. And bearing in mind that we spend over 70% of our life at work, more than that in the last 18 months because of that scope creep. Yeah. You don't have to be Einstein to work out that if you are spending so much of your work life covering, you're not going to be very happy, let alone creative or productive. You're just not going to be very happy. So I think that the key is to have people that don't feel that they need to cover in your organization. I think the secret to creativity is that diversity of thought. And I talk about this a lot. I've got an 11-year-old boy and I'm a single mum. And so when we could have a night out, and even during lockdown, Disney Plus, Marvel and the Avengers was our go-to. And the Avengers is that brilliant picture of diversity, because I really do believe, I genuinely do believe this, that everyone's got a superhero power.
Yeah.
And as a leader or as a manager, it's your job to find it, unlock it, nurture it. And you put people with different superhero powers together and you get a brilliant Avengers team. I mean, I like being Nick Fury. So you get that brilliant Avengers team that come together. And I think that's the secret of getting winning teams, people that don't feel as though they have to cover, that can turn up, learn from other people that have a different thought process to them, different references to them. That's what fuels amazing creativity and amazing transformation. And it's hard to do because it means that, look, you're not always going to get consensus. There is going to be conflict. So you have to be good at conflict management, but it's healthy. It's a healthy conflict. And you've got to lean in and not be scared of that, because it always leads to a better end result. And I think that's the secret. It's truly believing that everybody's got a superhero talent, and it's how you get it out of them and get them feel comfortable in a room of celebrating difference. And that's what I love. It's literally celebrating everybody's uniqueness and superhero skills.
How did that come about for you, that thinking? I mean, did somebody do that for you? Did somebody identify, you've got a superhero power, Karen, and I'm going to bring it out, and that's something that you learn? Or do you just think that's you wired that way?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think I started life, I mean, I'm here as a failed athlete because that was my first love and passion. So I'm a failed athlete. So I used to be a sprinter, and I was always in the 4x100 relay.
Oh, wow.
And you saw this, and I was the bend runner. So I was your specialist bend runner. Because, and I always like third leg rather than first leg because the race was on third leg. But you saw how the coach, so which is why I adore you, Scott, because that coaching mentality in terms of everything you do, I think is really important. And I was used to it from athletics, always having a coach that would look and observe. And I think feedback's a gift, and would feedback how you get a better start, how you do a better baton change, whatever it may be. And so how you pair people, how you put people together to create a winning team. I had that from a very early life from athletics. So I think part of it is from that, which was nurtured in me, and then applying it into a business context or a work context, and experiencing it myself. When I joined a tiny agency called Media Business, I found a bunch of people who were pioneers and misfits, and I fitted right in. Because we're all very different. I couldn't do some of the things that Sue Unerman did. I could not do some of the things that Mark Collins did, and they couldn't do some of the things that I did, but we were brilliant as a team because we had very different skill sets and very different reference points in terms of our background.
You still work with some of them now, I know.
I do. Well, Media Business, that tiny little corner shop agency, became MediaCom.
Yeah, what a fantastic story. And what we do next, Karen, is we go into we always try to help our viewers understand kind of the process that we do here at the Boom, which is unblock, unlock, unleash. And so when we start thinking about unblocking, we start thinking about, okay, what does success look like? So what would your vision of success look like? And the question I always ask everyone, and then that stems our next bit of conversation, is if you were to wake up tomorrow and everything was how you wanted it in your vision of success in your industry and what you're doing now, you just looked out the window and went, yeah, everything's how I want it to be. What would that look like or be like for you? What would have happened, and what would you have achieved, and what would be going on?
Look, the first thing has to relate to our industry and the need for more diversity, because that, as I said, leads to more creativity. So we wouldn't be having any more panels talking about diversity because we would just be living it. I would be showing up to talk about my craft and my work, not about being a woman and being Black. So that would be a brilliant success because it's become the norm and not the exception. So that is a picture of success. Also, I mean, how we work with our clients and advertising brands and our media owner partners. For me, it's about how we co-create. So I love working with clients and media owner and tech partners where we create something together and we go to market together. So we're starting to do that in terms of, well, what product can we launch? What service can we launch? I would love to see us having that really symbiotic relationship, more so with client, advertisers and brands, but also with our media owner partners and tech companies, because I think the knowledge that all three have in terms of bringing it together to market for something that consumers may want or need, I think would be amazing. And look, there'd be no more ridiculous entries into Cannes and all the awards ceremony, which is loads of people just showboating the latest widget or thing that they've discovered, which has absolutely no effect on business outcomes. So for me, ensuring that what we do is recognised as having an impact in terms of business outcomes. There's no more nonsense about coverage and frequency and reach as an output. That actually what we do is baked and linked and measured on business outcomes. And look, there's lots of advertisers and brands doing that with their agencies, but that should be the norm.
I'd like to pick up on that again shortly, but I want to go back to the first thing that you were talking about, which is something obviously very close to my heart as well as it is to yours. And you were quoted in a Media 360 interview, I think last year. You were
Being a
famous.
unicorn.
Yeah, you said
not wanting to be everyone's one black friend.
That's right. Yeah,
and we literally it's me and June Sarpong. I went, you must have a better Rolodex than me and June. Please, people, look through your phone. You've got to have some other people other than me. If we're the only black people, you've got to start looking at your circle, check the circle, and widen it a bit.
And I mean, we had June on the show actually not long ago.
My sister from another mister.
She's amazing, yeah, absolutely brilliant. And she was talking as well about, her experience of being the only, not just the only black face in the room, but the only woman in the room as well, and being a black woman, with a really strong voice and point of view, and trying to get that heard. And I've had the same. I mean, I work with June now on the British Fashion Council, and I'm on the board there again, helping to put really hold people to account on what diversity needs to look like in fashion. It's not easy. It's tough. The thing that I can get my head around, like you say, it's proven that diversity-powered teams make the biggest impact on organizations. So what do you think is holding lots of industries back? This isn't just a media industry issue or an advertising industry issue. It's a lot of industry. But what is holding people back from really thinking through diversity and making the changes that need to happen?
Look, I think there's a few things. I think there is the need for allyship training in organizations to understand people's positions that they're in and that position of privilege, and how you can use it to be an ally to create change. Because I still go into rooms where I see people rolling their eyes when I say, diverse teams are winning teams, better creativity, and they switched off. And I think part of that is because there's a belief that it's either or, that it can't be together, that if you get more diversity, it means that their roles or their jobs or their positions are going to be under threat. So trying to maintain the status quo. So I think there is I hate unconscious bias training. I think it's a hygiene. I don't think it leads to any real tangible change. I really don't. No. I think it's something that every organization should do, just like they have to do
health and safety,
bribery training or health and safety training. Yeah. Whereas if you learn how to be an ally and really understand what allyship is, I think that is one of the things that is holding organizations back. You do not have a management team, and I say management, not just leadership, but it's anybody that manages people, a management team that are allies.
Yes.
I also think it's fear as well, and that fear of getting something wrong. Because that there can be a backlash and a concern about corporate brand reputation if you get something wrong, or if you use the wrong terminology, so there's that fear, I think, holds people back as well. And that fear can be countered if you just check your circle. If you widen your circle, you have somebody that you can just ask the questions that you're worried about, and they can say, no, you shouldn't say that. You say it like this, or yeah, I get what you're doing, and just give that advice to in a safe space. So I do think fear is the other thing, because people are worried about getting it wrong and being lambasted for it if they do.
Yeah.
And then I also think that there's this perception that you have to wait for people to come in. And actually, no, you've got to go out. This isn't about you building it and people will come. You've got to go out to where people are. And I think that's the other thing. I've heard lots of organizations go, well, we've created this amazing program for X, and to come in at an apprenticeship, or to come in as this, and to come in at that, at grassroots, and nobody's applied, or we've hardly got anybody through. Well, what have you done to warm them up? What have you done to go in and convince them that because they don't see many people that look like them on your management team, your organization is a safe space for them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing. And then I just think, look, and this is a generalization, I just think the British are quite uncomfortable with uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
And we don't like talking about race, as an example. We don't like the uncomfortable conversations. We will tend to brush over them, and we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
It's so true, actually, because a lot of what you're saying there, I've been doing a lot of work recently about like literally creating transformational change, not just like digital, but like the way that people do things, like physically, literally, and within the office. And one of the key things that's always stuck in my mind is if you want big results, you've got to uncover big possibilities. The only way you can uncover big possibilities is have big conversations. And I'm pleasantly surprised when people say, "Oh, that's really simple. That's a really simple model." But then I'm also kind of taken aback when people they don't know actually the kind of conversations to have, or how to start the conversations, or indeed how to deal with the conversation if it doesn't go the way that they think it's going to go, and it goes down a route that's like, well, I don't quite know what to say here.
Yeah.
And it goes, and I think it goes, it's two-way, because I do a lot of work with young kids from all sorts of different backgrounds, and I say to them, would you like to be in the media industry or the advertising industry? They're like, no. It's not because necessarily they don't feel represented. They're doing their own thing out here, right? And they've got an audience of 15 million people like that, and they just do what they want and talk to those people, and they get results. So they're like, I do it anyway. And so I also think there's a bit of this kind of industry thinking that isn't like, well, this is how we do things. Like, look at these people over here who are doing it for half the price and all that sort of thing, and getting more essentially. How do you connect with them? You don't have to bring them into the office to be part of the business, but you can connect with them in interesting ways. And I think that there's lots of scope to unblock that old thinking of, well, this is the way it's done.
Look, Scott, you and I both know that before the pandemic hit, people didn't think that you could work from home. And look at how we've managed to unblock that. Absolutely. So I totally agree about the model and structure of work, and how we bring talent in is also ready for a shake-up and change. I totally agree. And look, I love the idea of having a touring squad of people come in, do something, shake things up, leave, rotate, another squad of people come in, you get brilliant creativity, they get great mentoring and knowledge from some people that are a bit longer in the tooth. That's a brilliant value exchange.
Absolutely. Because in then you're just helping mold a little bit, but the essence of the brilliance is still there. You're just shaving a couple of edges and helping them get through. But I think the interesting thing you say is you can learn so much from those young people doing it in the way they're doing it that you would never learn if you just kind of stick in the old long in the tooth kind of mode. Just like you were saying earlier about IT switching, like people learning how to use Zoom and all that sort of thing, like grandparents and stuff learning how to use technology because of necessity is just kind of the same principle that you could apply within the industry in itself. I want to move on to thinking about shaping the future and how you go about doing that, because of course it's hard, and it needs we need to reframe things, like you were just talking about there. Like, how do we reframe our perspective on certain things? If I were to ask, what I love doing is giving the audience like tips and advice from people like yourself. But if I were to ask you for a couple of tips on how you go about doing that, when you're unlocking ideas, unlocking thinking, how do you reframe or reshape your going in point so that you can get a different perspective and unlock the kind of the results and impact that you want to see?
Look, I think that has to come from inspiration. So look, when I started in the Group M role, we had a new global CEO who had started October 2019, and he'd spent a bit of time thinking about, well, what does Group M stand for? What's our vision? What are we going to be? Because everybody could quote 1 in 3 ads is a Group M ad, but what do we stand for? What's our purpose? What's our vision? And Christian vision, he sort of talked about how we're responsible for shaping the next era of media where advertising works better for people. It sounds lofty, but my God, how inspiring is that? But it also sounds quite big. And oh my God, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
And so for me, I chunked it down because it's not one size fits all. That can mean different things to different people in different markets. So that's just a real tangible example. It's like, right, well, what does that mean for the UK? What does that mean that we should be doing? And chunking it down into bite-sized pieces that then doesn't become this big, grand, lofty vision. It becomes tangible and meaningful. And the way that you do that, I think, is you've got to have that big network to draw on, because getting related worlds, talking about other industries or other brands, and I think that's the bit that I love about my job, which I think is such a privilege, that you can talk to the fashion industry, or you can talk to the car industry, or you can talk to the consumer packaged goods industry, or you can talk to the travel and airline industry, and get all of those different references and sources about, well, how would they interpret something similar in their industry sector? What have they done? How have they evolved? How have they transformed? And I think having a wide network of different types of people, as well as people from different industries, different backgrounds, that's how you sort of get to that inspiration that can be distilled and then importantly implemented. Because you and I have both seen in our careers lots of brilliant strategies which have been spoken about and then no idea how to implement it. So rooting it, I think you need those tangible examples, and that has to come from having a really wide network. I always talk about build your network, make it wide and varied, because that's where you can really get inspiration from. And more importantly, when you bring different people of your network together to help unblock things, magic can happen.
Absolutely.
Total magic can happen.
Absolutely. And I think that's, again, it's another great observation about the kind of conversations that can happen when we talk about diversity. Because, when we say diversity, people naturally go down the kind of diverse race and gender and all that sort of route. But I think what you're saying, and what I firmly believe as well, and it's kind of this thinking that people like Matthew Syed talk about, that cognitive diversity is equally, if not, it's incredibly equally powerful. And that just happens actually when you bring lots of different people from different backgrounds and stuff together anyway. But it is like your network, if you've got, a friend who's a doctor, or a friend who's, a scientist over here, or a friend who writes over here, or someone who's just having that different perspective across everything, and just constantly drawing that inspiration from people is incredibly, incredibly powerful in helping drive creativity and different thinking.
Look, I've got DJs, politicians, surgeons, music artists, I mean, all sorts in my network, which, I'd never go to them and say, well, what is, creating the next era of, I've never asked them that, but it's just references from their day and their industry.
Yeah.
You can see it as a parallel or related world. I just think it's a privilege to have, and I need it in order to inspire me. And look, there are people that I work with every day. Perry Nightingale at WPP, his brain is unbelievable. Stefan Pretorius, who's our global chief technology officer, so straight talking, so empathetic, unbelievable in terms of his intellect, but humble with it as well. No ego about it as well. He just said something as though it's natural. Just like, okay,
yeah,
but brilliant. So, mixing with those people is always helpful.
I think it's also, one of the key things about advertising, media industry, and the kind of big networks, and of course, you're heading up one of the biggest. But sometimes I'm surprised when I work with agencies how unleveraged their network is in the purest sense, as in, have you spoken to those people in that market, or have you spoken to, people here who work in strategy on this brand, because there's so much you could, joining the dots in interesting ways. What can you take from FMCG that you could apply to the car industry, that you could apply up here to, something else? How do you bring all that together? And, quite often I'm surprised there's so much overlap, actually. People are creating the same thing in different markets, but not bringing it all together and going, oh yeah, actually you're doing that, let's bring that together and bring it. So I think there's a real opportunity in that too.
And look, that is, that's my WPP role. It was literally, we have got amazing operating brands, but we didn't necessarily have the connection between them. So, WPP was a collection of amazing brands, which, Martin Sorrell had sort of started, but there was no framework or connection between them. When Mark Reed came in and looked at a strategy around growth, which was actually communications is what we do, but the conversations that we're having with clients and the help that they need is around commerce, around experience, and around marketing technology. And look, we've got some operating brands that are able to help in that area, but we just didn't know each other. So part of my role is connecting our operating brands so that we create that Avengers assemble, but also helping introduce clients to the right companies as well. But you're right, even between people, it's making sure that, just within one opco, that everyone knows what the other person's doing. And we started doing these Ignite sessions in my WPP role, which are literally operating companies that were given 10 minutes to talk about what they do, when people should pick up the phone, and a source of inspiration in terms of work. Simple as that. Quick and easy, bite size, and that really helps. And that's a massive inspiration for people in there. It gets them out of their normal river of thinking and gets them to think about something else for a bit.
Totally right. And it is often just the simple things that have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
I'd like you to, who do you think is leading the way currently in your industry? You have to name a businessman, but just like maybe an individual. So something that you see, you go, oh, that is really mind blowing. That is really the kind of thing that I think is the future.
Look, I mentioned him earlier, but Perry Nightingale at WPP, some of the work that he's been doing around AI and how you use AI in the creative process. And there is an amazing woman at Wunderman Thompson in the US called Christina Mallon, who is really thinking about our diversity practice and what we do to ensure we're thinking about all forms of diversity. And she was paralyzed, and she essentially looks at design thinking for and making it more inclusive. So it's our inclusive practice. So looking at design thinking for a group of people around the globe who may have a physical disability. So some of the work that she's done with Tommy Hilfiger, some of the work that she's doing with Unilever in terms of package design, it's amazing. So I do think Christina Mallon is amazing at Wunderman Thompson, and Perry Nightingale, his brain at WPP, and the work he's doing. I mean, he lectures at Oxford University, I think. So some of the work he's doing on AI, unbelievable. I don't understand half of what he says, but the half that I do is brilliant.
It's amazing, yeah. Well, one of the key things we're also drawing out of tonight's session, Karen, is that you are absolutely driven by action. It's like, when we talked earlier, there's no point in coming up with great thinking, unblocking the challenges, unlocking great inspiration and ideas, and then not unleashing it and creating the action that makes it move forward. And hence the last bit of what we talk about is unleashing, and in delivering that future, and the future that you described. And I'm really interested in the diversity side of it and the diversity inclusion side. What are you most sort of proud of setting up and making happen in order to make that real?
Oh, there are so many things which I can sort of see how they've then gone on to inspire or link to other things which have happened. So look, when I first became a CEO, which was many moons ago, God, when was that? 2009, 2010. And being able to, you know, I'd always been an agitator before I became a CEO to try and push the thinking, push diversity and inclusion. And it wasn't even a thing then, do you know what I mean? It wasn't even something that organizations were focused on or knew that it's about future-proofing our business. It's not an altruistic thing to do, but a business imperative to do. Absolutely. It wasn't. But I just knew that it's a focus because it would unlock more creativity. So, you know, bringing in, my big thing was about our industry's terrible about only recruiting graduates, and at best graduates from a handful of universities. And look, we've gone through a period where it might not be affordable for people to go to university anymore. And some people don't want to go to university either. So, you know, the apprenticeship program, which we brought in, which is, it sounds ridiculous, but the first one in our industry sector in 2012, which is a government-backed one. So you studied and got an MVQ in marketing and communications as an apprentice. That I'm so proud of, and that's become something which has continued since 2010. That whole focus on DEI, you know, that led to, you know, my successor, which was Josh Krzyzewski, working with Nancy Langthorne to really focus on mental health and looking at how important our mental health is as part of our everyday life, and that looking at that then being that we introduced mental health allies into the organisation. That's now spread across WPP in the UK. We've had mental health training for our leaders. It's just amazing at the number of things that it sort of led into. You know, even during lockdown, we spent a lot of time working with Microsoft and looking at dyslexia and what that meant for the number of the people which were suffering from dyslexia that was suddenly then forced to be working on a screen all day, what that meant in terms of actually giving some workshops and helps for parents who were concerned about screen time for their kids and kids that had dyslexia as well. So there's a bunch of things that I'm really proud of. And look, during last year with everything that happened with George Floyd, Judy Jackson, who is our head of culture at WPP, ran a safe room in the US. And it's like, well, this isn't just something that's affecting the US. So having an organization like WPP, which encouraged you to sort of do safe rooms for our people to be able to talk about how they were feeling. I'm not sure many organizations have that benefit, and we did. And then our Roots network, I'm so proud of WPP Roots, which is our sort of cultural inclusion and ethnic community, ethnic minority community, which started at Ogilvy, which we took and spread across all of WPP. It's gone international now. It's in the US, it's in the Netherlands. It's amazing because that is a massive bunch of change makers, and it's not an ERG. It's actually a community of people which will affect the work. And that's what's amazing as well. Of course, it's about ensuring that we have progression of more people from an ethnic minority background in our organisations, but it's also about how we can affect the work. So look, there's a bunch of things which I'm proud of. But look, there's more still to come. And you know, I'm really focused on, because of everything that happened last year, I did a lot of interviews and TV programs and articles about racial equity in modern Britain and the UK. And because of that, you know, I've been spurred on to ensure that I make that generational shift. So there is something coming which we'll be launching in October, which is my side hustle. I don't know how many sides I've got, but my side hustle, which is really focused on racial equity in the UK and ensuring that we make that generational shift. Because whether you look at cultural inclusion, empowerment and awareness, whether you look at economic empowerment, whether you look at education, health, criminal justice system, unfortunately, Black people in the UK are still disadvantaged. Yeah. And it is time to make that generational shift. And I need to do it, and I'm spurred on to do it because of Isaac, because of my 11-year-old.
Absolutely. And I know from knowing you that you will do it.
Absolutely.
You can count on my help as well, as and when you need it.
Don't you worry, you're getting called in.
I know I'm going to get a call. And when it's all announced, we'll make sure that we share that. What we can, when you can share it properly, we'll share that out as well to all the people in our network, because they'll be definitely interested in getting involved and hearing more about it. All that, I mean, there's just such an amazing wealth of stuff that you've done, Karen. And what people often ask, when I talk about unleashing stuff, and when they hear guests on the show, they go, God, they've done so much. And, how can I ever get into a position where I can do anything like that? And I sort of talked to them about, well, there's the work that you need to do as an individual, but then there's the work that you need to do in terms of inspiring stakeholders and people and peers and people who are going to help you to get these things done. Is there a tip that you can share about how you do that, how you inspire stakeholders, how you get them on board, how you share your vision and get action to happen by bringing people along with you?
The two things that I always say somebody needs in order to ensure that you get career progression and to ensure that your voice is heard. I never say finding your voice, because we've always had a voice. It's just about making sure it's heard and that people will listen. Look, that you need cheerleaders, and you've always been a massive cheerleader of mine and me, of you. So you need those cheerleaders, because you need those people that will help you fly higher, and those people that will pick you up when times are hard and you're at your lowest. So you need those cheerleaders, because those are the ones that will keep you going. When you keep facing a shut door, or you keep falling over the tripwire, or you keep finding that nobody's listening despite how hard you're trying and talking, you need those cheerleaders to get you, to remind you of your passion and your purpose and why you're doing it, and to give you the energy to keep going. So you need those cheerleaders, but you have to find those sponsors. You have to find those people who are more senior than you, who have access to the rooms that you don't yet. And you find them naturally by working with them on a piece of business, them seeing what you're capable of. You don't sort of, because I always find it weird when people go, will you sponsor me? And I'm like, I don't even know who you are. I just think it's weird.
Yeah, you've got to do some work to get the sponsorship, right? Yeah,
but you've got to know what that person's capable of.
Yeah.
You've got to know how they work. You've got to know, the conditions that get the best out of them. And that sponsor is the person that will start widening the doors, kicking open the doors, creating those opportunities, being your co-pilot or wingman when you need it. And you have to have a sponsor, and you can't just hope. You can't just hope that what you do is going to be seen, because hope is not a strategy. It's really not. So the implementation comes from actively finding your network of cheerleaders and actively ensuring you have a sponsor. But the sponsor has to come naturally, and it has to be based on them seeing what you're capable of. I mean, you can do a piece of work together and then go and that's how I've always done it. Do a piece of work together, and then that piece of work or project concludes, but then you stay in touch and ask them for, could you just give me some advice on this, or I'm facing that. You just keep asking them for advice, and they don't even know that they've become your sponsor, but they have become your sponsor.
That's a good way to do it, yeah.
You need both. You need those cheerleaders and you need those sponsors, and you need those cheerleaders to make sure that they're helping market your work, market what you're capable of.
Brilliant.
Because again, any brand or product without marketing stays on a shelf.
Very true. Very true. and it's got to have a decent value proposition as well. So you're right. You know, you've got to show what the value is that you're bringing. Yeah. So no, that's great. That's great advice, and I'm sure people will use that, because it is one of the hardest things. You know, like you say, it's easy to come up with ideas and easy to come up with strategies, easy to do all the talking, but when you've actually got to do the hard yards, then you know you can't just do it all on your own. You know, you really do need cheerleaders and sponsors.
Yeah.
We've got just enough time, Karen, for our statutory quick fire round to ask you a few last things before we go. So I'm going to ask you: are you reading a book at the moment, or if you maybe you're too busy to, I don't know, or listening to one, or what's a book that's inspired you lately?
Do you know what? I have just been sent, so I haven't read it yet, but I've just been sent Barack Obama's new book.
Great. By him?
It's quite... Yes.
Oh, yes.
No, by his publishers. It's quite a meaty read, so it might take me a while.
Was quite meaty as well, yeah.
It might take me a while, so I'm looking forward to that. But look, from a book that I can read over and over and over again, it has to be To Kill a Mockingbird is just my favourite book. Genuinely my favourite book, because it encapsulates so much of the values and my purpose and what I believe in that book. So that is my favourite book that I will go back to time and time again. There's another book called Billy, which is a bit of a weepy, which I can't read up that often. But yeah, that is my favourite book.
It's very prescient as well, given the circumstances of the last few years. What is one piece of advice you were given that has stuck with you all your life?
I'm just laughing because there's... I won't say that.
You say what you like. It's we anything that's anything's fair game on here.
Something that I say to my son now, which really annoys him, but it's what my mum and dad used to say to me, is 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. Always listen. And you think about it, some of the best leaders are the ones that listen and really listen and tune in, then speak. Absolutely. Some of the worst leaders I've ever worked with are the ones that have got that proportion the wrong way around.
Yeah.
So 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that proportion.
Absolutely brilliant bit of advice, especially for aspiring leaders, especially for people. And I think what's interesting when you say that actually is when we talked earlier about, having your voice, not finding your voice, having your voice heard. Sometimes it's very difficult when you're a young up and coming leader to follow that mantra of 2 ears, because you want your voice to be heard, and it feels like you're shouting and actually you're right. Sometimes it's not about saying more words. It's about listening to what's being said and then using your words.
And then speaking.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where the power comes. And who was your childhood hero?
So I was a daddy's girl, and my dad was massive boxing fan and cricket fan. So Muhammad Ali. So I used to be allowed to stay up to watch Muhammad Ali fights. So Muhammad Ali, and then one of my earliest childhood memories is going to the Oval when the West Indies were legendary and having a cowbell and ringing it every time that there was a 6 scored. So
fantastic.
The sort of late 70s, early 80s West Indian cricket team, every single one of them. So whether that was Joel Garner, whether that was
Viv Richards,
Gordon Greenidge, Viv Richards, they are all, because that was, to me, that was my first, it genuinely was my first view of black excellence.
Yeah.
It really genuinely was. So they were my heroes, and then we got a bit crap.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, Karen, I could speak all night, but we are at the end of time for Boom Time this evening, and I must say thank you so much for giving us wonderful insight.
Such a lovely time chatting with you, and you know what I'm like, I can talk for Thank you
so much. Fly when we're having fun, and for everybody who's listening to this and on the recording of it, there'll be a boom sheet that we'll create with all the insights that have come from tonight, from Karen's wonderful words of advice. And you know, what I really take from tonight is that diversity is absolutely, it's not a nice to have, it's not something just to be thinking about, but it's actually business critical. And the more you're thinking about it, the more you're delivering it in the business, you need to be, because the world is changing and everything's changed post-lockdown, and now's as good a time as ever to create that future that you want to see. So until next time, thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for watching and watching the recording. And until next time, stay boom.